All right. How are you guys today? Yes. Hello from the future. I'm just close this window. It will get better. Hello. Hello, Leandro. Hello, Cam. Hello, Ryan. Roger in English. Hello, Jassy. Hello, Tyson. Felipe. How are you guys going? It's like Saturday morning here in Sydney, Australia. And I guess it's like Friday night for some of you guys as well. Hello, Thais. Yay, so excited. Guys, seriously, like, you guys are so brave because it's like, it's either Friday night or Saturday morning, and you decided to be here with me to talk about grammar. You know, like, you guys are amazing. Like, seriously, how can you do that? And just look at me and just hear me talking about grammar, right? Or like, yes, thanks God, like, thank God it's Friday. TGIF. Like, Friday night, let's talk about grammar. English grammar is like best topic ever for Friday night. Oh, you're doing so good. Let me just stop the music. Oh, what did I do here? Oh, it's repeating. Stop music. Okay, cool. All right. So today is our lesson number 4 of our English Confidence Week. Can you guys hear me well? Like, just let me know if you can hear me, if you can see me. I'm just checking my earphones. So today is our lesson number 4 in our English Confidence Week. And for lesson number 4, we're going to talk about grammar. So I think grammar, it could be both. Like, grammar could be something that really helps you with your English, or it can be something like a big monster. So before I start, let me know, what is grammar for you? So do you think like grammar, it's more like a big monster for you? Or do you think grammar actually helps you to speak English? So I want to know first, before I start with the topic, let me know, what do you think about English grammar? And of course, I'm gonna give my opinion. I'm gonna give you guys some strategies to improve your grammar. But before that, I wanna know, what do you think about grammar? And let me know, and then we can talk about it. Do you say it's a monster for her? Yes. Why, G? Like, why are you saying that? Do you think it's really hard to memorize the rules? Do you think it's like too many rules? Sometimes we study grammar, but we cannot apply when we are actually speaking and writing. So why do you think it's a monster? And then let me know. Cynthia is saying it's a monster as well. Felipe is saying just love it. Felipe, do you love grammar? And if yes, tell me why. So why do you love grammar? Renato is saying, like, I love preposition. Preposition is one of the topics. So when we talk about grammar, we talk like about the sentences, we talk about the different types of sentences, we talk about the verbs, we talk about the nouns, the adverbs, we talk about prepositions. So all of that is part of the grammar topic, right? So let me know, what do you guys find hard in terms of grammar? And my question, it's not really related to a topic, because I'm not gonna give you like English class here. I'm not gonna teach you like, okay guys, so when do you use the preposition in? Like, that's not my goal here. But let me know, what aspect of grammar do you think it's hard? Do you think it's hard to memorize? Do you think it's hard to understand the rules? Do you think it's hard to apply the rules when you are actually speaking and having a conversation, because you have to think of 2 things at the same time? So what do you think it's hard? Like, what do you feel about grammar? Do you saying because I don't study a lot, I like more pronunciation? Me too. I'll get some coffee, and I hope I'm not gonna spill coffee on myself like I did yesterday. All right, so let's get it started. So when we talk about grammar, first thing, grammar, once I say grammar, some people, they have like goosebumps. They are like, oh no, like, she's gonna talk about grammar. But actually, when we think about grammar, besides the name grammar, that is a little bit scary already, we actually think about the rules, and we are actually talking about the structure, right? So when we learn grammar, we are learning the structure of the language. So we are learning how to put the words together. We are learning what types of words we have, and then how to use them to express what we are trying to say, okay? So when we think about grammar, think about its structure, think about the rules, think about the patterns of the language, okay? This I say in grammar is my little monster sometimes. I feel like I know, but when I'm applying, seems like I'm doing it wrong. Exactly, right? It's so much to think about. And Renata is saying I can keep in my mind passive voice, and Barbara is saying past participle really hard. Yeah, so in my opinion, like I studied grammar for many years, right? I've studied English for at least like 10 years in like English courses. And I liked grammar actually. Like I didn't like English at that time, but I enjoyed studying grammar. And the reason why I enjoyed studying grammar is because I am a logical person. So if you think about your main intelligences, logical mathematics is one of my main intelligences. So I used to be very good at mathematics at school. I used to be like the logical brain of the family, while my sister was the English language brain of the family. So when I think about grammar, for me, grammar, it was something really cool actually, because I could understand the rules and then I could try to apply them. Because when we think about rules, we actually have like, oh, this is how it works. So this is how the English language works. The problem for me was when I actually had to apply the rules in my real life because I forgot the rules. And then also when we started talking about the exceptions, because English is a language. So any language, of course, there are some rules that they are made to guide us. But the problem is when we have exceptions. And then in my head, I didn't get the exceptions because I was like, no, but this is the rule. Like this is when I use to, this is when I use for. So why is this other situation different, you know? But when we talk about language, when we talk about linguistics, we are not just talking about patterns. We are not just talking about rules. So we need to understand that a lot of things, they won't make sense, right? And even if you think about your first language, and this is an exercise that I really like doing with my students. Think about, for example, a native English speaker learning your first language. So how do you think they're gonna be? Like, how do you think they're gonna go with that? Right? Because if I think about my first language, if I think about Portuguese, and if I look back and I think about my Portuguese grammar lessons, I don't remember them. I just speak Portuguese because it's my first language, right? But if you ask me, for example, about in Portuguese, we have something like oração subordinada, substantiva, verbo transitivo, direto, indireto, predicativo do sujeito. So all these names, like if I think about grammar in my first language, I would be like, oh, wow, I don't know, like I don't really care, to be honest, right? Because I'm not a Portuguese teacher. So when we think about grammar, it's either like, so when we think, for example, does grammar matter? What do you guys think? Like, do you think that grammar is an important thing to learn English or to learn another language? So Barbara is saying yes. Different ways basically to do the same thing. Exactly. G is saying me neither. I just think Portuguese is really complicated. We can kind of play with it. It's hard where I use student for. Exactly. So there are so many rules, right? And then Mila is saying apply grammar when I need to speak. It's hard for me because everything makes in my brain. Exactly. And something that I felt as well when I was in my English course, it was, for example, imagine that today we have classes about past verbs, like past sentences, right? And then I learned the rules, I learned the grammar, I like the verbs, like, oh yeah, it's just like to add ed at the end, and there is this charge for like irregular verbs, and everything looks beautiful. And then when I actually go to real life, I'm like, okay, but what should I do now? Like, should I use past? Should I use present? Should I use present perfect? Should I use, you know? So it was like a big confusion for me, because when we go to English courses, we actually learn the topic. So it's like, today's topic is present perfect. And then when we are actually having a conversation in real life, we don't really have time to think about it, right? When we are speaking, when we are having a conversation in real life, we don't have this section. So we cannot say like, okay, so in this conversation, I'm gonna use only past tenses. It's like, it's not an option, right? Because we just mix it up. So when we think about grammar, I would say, is grammar important? Yes, grammar is important. And that's why there are so many good English schools and private English teachers as well, because grammar, it is actually the structure of the language, right? So when we think about grammar, the problem for me, and what I tell my students, is like, the problem is the way we see the grammar, the way we think about grammar, and the way we use and we learn and we apply grammar. The problem is not learning grammar, the problem is applying grammar, right? Because we actually have to use that in real life. So if we just keep the theory, if we just keep the classroom, we are going to forget the rules, right? And when we think about grammar, so first thing, how do we change our thoughts about grammar? So I think one very good thing, I actually started to take a little bit easier with me in terms of grammar when I started to think that grammar is a tool that is gonna help me to learn a new language. So for example, imagine that you want to learn another language. Imagine, like, if it's not even English, you just want to learn another language. And imagine that there's no rules for that language. How would you learn it if there was no rule? How would you do that? Imagine, how did you learn your first language when you were like a baby? Did you study grammar when you were like 1 year old? Like, do you teach grammar for babies and stuff? I've never seen that before. So how do we learn? How do we learn our first language? Is it in a grammar class? So if I look back and I think about Portuguese, which is my first language, and I think about how I learned grammar, or how I supposed to learn grammar, that was like maybe when I was already like 12 or 13 years old at school. And then I started having like Portuguese grammar lessons. Before that, how do we do that when we are actually babies? So babies, when we are born, we don't speak yet, right? And depending on the house that we grow up, depending on the country that we are born, we start to listen to that specific language. And then we start to try to copy, right? We start trying to repeat what our parents are saying, what people around us are saying. So the first step to learn a new language is listening. Yeah, Barbara got it right away, like listening. So if you think like when you are a baby, you don't speak yet, you just listen. And you listen for at least like a year until you start actually trying to say your first words. And then you listen and you try to repeat, right? So the first step to learn a new language is actually listening to the language, getting more familiar to the language, getting your brain more familiar to the language, right? So when we move to another country and we start to have this contact with another language for the first time, it is normal that we're gonna listen much more than we're gonna speak, because we're having this first contact, right? And then slowly we try to repeat, right? So we try to pay attention on pronunciation, on the meaning of the words, the meaning of the sentences. So we start to repeat and create words, okay? So why do we have grammar? We have grammar because grammar can make this process faster. Because if you can understand the rules and you can understand the patterns of the language, you can understand the blocks, it gets easier for you to create something. So if you think about your first language, how long does it take for you to learn and to speak your first language? And then to study, to start reading and writing. So I started reading, I think when I was like 4 or 5 years old. And then I started writing as well. But like that was like at least 5 years old. So imagine just like studying English for 5 years and not learning how to read and write. That would be like so frustrating. And imagine then just learn grammar like after that, after like 12 years. Imagine that I started learning Portuguese grammar when I was 12 years old. Now imagine if you had to wait and study English for 12 years and then start to learn grammar. Wouldn't it be like much worse? So we need to think about grammar as a tool that can actually help us, because once you can understand some rules, and I'm not saying all of them because there are so many rules, once you can understand the main rules, this is gonna help you to communicate. Okay, so is grammar important? Yes, grammar is very important. The problem is the way that we are doing that. So this is one thing. Then other thing that happens, it's actually that sometimes we focus too much on grammar, and this is my point number 2. Sometimes we focus too much on grammar, and then the more we learn about grammar, the more we think that we don't know anything because there are so many rules. So it's kind of a loop. And then if you are in the loop, like you're just studying, and you never think you are good enough, and you never think you know enough grammar to go out and speak, you will never speak, because you are always waiting for the moment that your grammar is gonna be good enough that you can actually create sentences and have a conversation. So what I would say is the best option for you to learn grammar and remember the grammar that you are learning, because that's the main point, right? I would say once you learn a grammar topic, don't try to learn like 20 topics at the same time. That's the first thing. You know, sometimes we just go like on YouTube, and then it's like, yes, now I'm gonna study English. I'm gonna go on YouTube, I'm gonna learn English, I'm gonna learn the rules and everything. And then you watch the first video, and the first video is like 2 versus 4, how to use the prepositions, right? Because we have this content on YouTube. And then you watch this lesson about 2 and 4. And then you don't apply this topic that you've just learned on YouTube. And then what do? You go to the next video. And then you're like, very interesting. Now I'm gonna go to the next video. And then the next video is like in, at, and on. And then you're like, oh, very interesting. I wanna see more of that. And then you go automatically to the next video because there is this option, right? Just go to the next video. And then next video is about present perfect. And then you watch it and you're like, okay, I got it. And then you go to the next video. So maybe like in one day, you watch videos about 5 different topics. And this is beautiful, but this is theory. So, okay, you watched like 5 different topics, but how many topics have you applied? How many topics have you practiced, right? So what I would say, choose one topic and then go deep in that topic before you move to the next topic. Because otherwise you're gonna go overwhelmed. You're gonna feel like you are studying English, but then you're just forgetting and you're just wasting time, right? Because you are watching like one topic on the top of the other topic. So what I would say, watch like one topic, and then during maybe like a few days or even like a week, just focus on that topic. So if you watch a video about 2 and 4, for example, and then after that, so just watch like, of course you can watch many different videos, but about the same topic. And then after you learned that topic, start doing other things about the same topic. So start speaking, so start talking to yourself, try to talk to other people, and then try to apply that one topic that you are studying at the moment. And then the most important part of grammar, it's not learning it, it's not like studying, it's not input, it's actually outputs. Because when you practice, that's when you actually learn, and that's when you memorize the rules, right? So choose one topic, study this topic, and then everything you're gonna do during that week, you're gonna focus on that topic. So if you're gonna watch movies with your eyes open for that topic. So if you are studying like 2 and 4 and you're gonna watch a movie, when you are watching the movie, stop and pay attention on what people are doing. So when they say, for example, when they say anything connected to 2 or 4, you will know. And then you're gonna be like, oh, this is how they're using it. So I'm gonna try to repeat, and then try to repeat out loud. And then once you go like in small steps, you can actually practice, and then you can feel that you are producing content. The problem is when we are always just studying, always just like having inputs, always like listening and reading, and then we are not producing anything. We are not speaking and we are not writing. And when you speak and when you write, it's actually when you create your English. And this is what's gonna help you with your confidence, okay? Does it make sense? Let me know your thoughts. I'll read your comments. Hannah is saying the meaning about present perfect is so hard, and I'm gonna mention that as well. Jose is saying that's what made me like get not motivated to study grammar. Barbara said listening. Yeah, Felipe is saying when it's put into practice, it becomes quite easy. Exactly. So the important thing is to do one step at a time, okay? Did it say problem with connection? My connection is fine here. So maybe it's on your phone. Let me know if you guys are having problem with connection. If more than one person is having problem with connection, then I think it's me. But if it's just one person, then I think it's on your side. Theory and practice, yes, exactly. So choose one topic at a time. And then more important than is studying, it's actually practicing. And I have some students that I actually, I'm really hard with them sometimes because I am very clear about it. I just look at them and I say, stop studying. You are studying too much. Stop studying. And this is very serious because sometimes we just feel like we have to study more. And we feel like, yeah, I don't know enough. I need to study more. And then I need to study more. I need to study more. And then you're gonna blow like a balloon and you're gonna pop. You're gonna feel like overwhelmed. You're gonna feel disappointed. You're gonna feel frustrated because you are only studying, but you're not producing anything. You are not practicing what you are doing. So I always say that there are 3 steps to learn English. Step number 1 is study. Step number 2, practice. And step number 3, repeat. So this is what I call the learning cycle. So this is the learning cycle, and then it just keeps going. So study one topic, practice that topic, and repeat, because once you repeat, you memorize, okay? And then after that, after you do the first cycle, you go again. So you choose another topic, and then you study that topic. And then step number 2, you practice that topic, and then you repeat. Sometimes we are just skipping the practice. So if you skip the practice, you're gonna get overwhelmed, you're gonna hate English, you're gonna get frustrated, you're gonna feel stuck because you are not using what you're learning. So just think about small steps. It's like breathing, right? Inhale and exhale, in and out. So if you just put air inside, what's gonna happen? You're gonna explode, right? Imagine that you are actually like, that you are just breathing, but then you are not exhaling. You're just like inhaling. You're gonna become like a balloon, right? So learning a topic, it's like breathing. It's like in and out, in and out, in and out, all the time. So Erica is saying she's having issues with the connection as well. I just changed my internet here and then see if it gets better. And I'm recording this live as well, so I'm gonna post it on my IGTV. And then if you have problems to watch, you can watch it after as well. Yes, Lydia is saying baby steps, study, practice, and repeat. That's perfect. That's the learning cycle, okay? So always 3 steps. If you are skipping any of these steps, that's a problem, right? If you are not studying, or if you are not practicing, or if you're not repeating, then we have a problem, right? Because something is missing there, and then you're not gonna learn. So I really want to encourage you guys to change your eyes regarding grammar, because the grammar is made to help us. The grammar is made to give us some structure, to give us some guideline on how to learn a new language. If we don't have guidelines in a language, how come we could ever be able to speak the same language? Imagine if I, Aline, if I speak one English, and then my other friend speaks another type of English with another ruse. And then another person speaks another type of English, because there are no rules, there are no patterns. That will be so weird. Like, it will be impossible to communicate, right? And this is the reason why every single language has their own rules, has their own patterns, their own structure. Because once you have some patterns, some like standards, thing starts to make sense, okay? So this is why we need to study grammar, because this is gonna bring you the base and the structure that you need to understand and to communicate in English or in any other language, okay? And then another thing that I want to mention, step number 3, is that the translating thing, right? We still have the translating thing with us. So the problem is when we start to compare English with our first language. So why is present perfect so difficult? And I want you guys to answer this question. Why is it so hard to learn present perfect? Let me know, and then I'll give you my thoughts. We have a discussion here about oranges. I like English, guys, it's just orange. We don't have to fight between like mexerica and bergamota. And for me, it's not even mexerica. I say mexerica. I don't think it's right, but that's how I say it. Like, it's okay. I can make some Portuguese mistakes as well. The hardest problem, I think, that is keeping touch with another person when you live in Brazil. Yes, yes and no, Renato. I agree disagreeing with that, because if you think about learning English 20 years ago without internet, that will be a challenge. But the problem is that we still keep like this mindset, we still keep like this idea that it's impossible to learn English in your home country, and it's not true, because today we have access to internet. And that's what allows us to be connected and to be together. So today we have so many facilities that we didn't have 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. We have online courses, we have YouTube. So I think we are living like a season, we're living like an era, the information age, which we are in the best moment to learn English. Like, we have everything we need for free. Like, we have so much good content for free on the internet, just like this class, right? Like, we don't even have to spend money for that. If you think like 10 years ago, or even like 15 years ago, when I started to study English 15 years ago, that was like so specific. It was expensive. It was not easy to get there. There were not a lot of options like English schools to choose. So I really had to make some effort. And even like the material in the class, we didn't have like interactive boards. It was pretty much like a whiteboard and a book. And then that's how I started studying English, with a whiteboard and a book. Today, if we go to English schools, like some English schools, the computer is on the board, and then the teacher is just like touching stuff, and then it starts like playing music and videos and everything on the whiteboard. And I was like, wow, what is happening, right? So it's like, ooh, what is going on? So I disagree that it's hard to learn English in our home country. I think if we make the effort to find people, to connect to people, we can do that. And the opposite is also true. It's not because people are living in another country. I'll use Australia because it's where I'm living today. But it's not because people are living in Australia that they are living a life in English. And that's a huge problem because it's so common and it's so easy to come to Australia and keep speaking your first language. Because it doesn't matter where you go, you'll always find your group. So there's always like the Brazilian group, the Spanish speakers group, the Chinese group, the Japanese group. So I would say it's even harder to learn English here because you are already far from your house. You get homesick, right? You want to be people similar to you. You want to connect to people who like the same food. You want to feel that you are home, even though you are in another country. So it is much easier to connect to people from your country. And this is why most people, they don't learn English because they are still not leaving the country. They are still living their life in another country, speaking their first language. So we create this type of expectation like, oh yes, like once I move to an English country, like once I move to Canada or when I move to Australia, I'm gonna speak English fluently. Like in 6 months, I'll be like, whoa, I'll be like perfect, I'll be so fluent. And then people just get here and they get disappointed because it's harder than they thought, right? So learning English in your home country, it's not a problem. I know people who've done it before. I did it before. So I studied English for over 10 years while I was in Brazil. What really helped me when I moved to Canada was that I was actually practicing more. And I just realized that when I was actually living there, right? So it doesn't matter where you are physically. What really matters is your effort. So your effort is gonna, what you're gonna do about it, right? So how much effort you're gonna put on it. It does, regardless if you are in your home country or in another country. So you always have the option. You always have the option to choose, okay? And then Lian is saying some people live in Los Angeles for years, like 15, 20 years, and cannot speak English. Same thing in Australia, same thing. And then what happens as well is when people are actually going back to their countries or for holidays or either for like moving back, they are actually shy because they are like, oh wow, like I lived in Australia for like 2 and 3 years and my English is not fluent, and people are going to ask me about that. And then it's like, okay, so what are you gonna do now? Like you cannot do in 1 week what you didn't do in 3 years, right? So it's never too late to start. And I would say it doesn't matter where you are. Like I think we should really like just change our way of thinking. Like stop thinking about excuses like, oh, I don't speak English because I am in Brazil, or I don't speak English because in my work I don't have the opportunity. You know, like we need to stop being like passive, like, and saying like it's because of this and because of that and because of that. It's like excuses. It doesn't matter. Like, what can you do about it? Like, okay, maybe you don't speak English at work. Maybe you don't have like people close to you who speak English. So what can you do about it? How can you use internet to help you? How can you meet people who know people who actually speak English and they can connect you with those people, right? So it's always about finding a way. Think about the solution, stop thinking about the problems and start thinking about the options, start thinking about the solutions, right? We need to change, we need to go for this like solution mindset, this solution way of thinking, pretty much. And then no matter where you are, you watching movies in English, you can do this from your home, no matter where you are. Listening to English songs, studying the lyrics of your favorite songs. You can do that no matter where you are. Speaking English, like talking to yourself and recording yourself, and then listen to yourself after. You can do this no matter where you are, right? So there are all these possibilities: Zoom, Skype, YouTube. You can do this no matter where you are. English books, you can get it no matter where you are. I remember 10 years ago when I wanted to read English books, I had to go to the bookstore like Saraiva or like other bookstores, and I actually had to order books in English because they didn't have a lot of options in store. Today, if you Google it and you put like PDF, you can pretty much get any book that you want. You can get audiobooks. You know, like this is a reality. So I didn't have that 10 years ago. And I was like, wow, I wish I was starting just now, right? And I'm thinking about my next language. So I'll just read your comments and then I'll keep going. Yeah, and I saying that happened to her, really disappointed after 6 months. Yeah, we do create like a high expectation, and then a lot of things come together, right? So like the agencies, they promise that kind of more like a marketing thing, and then we come with this expectation like, oh, everything is gonna be easy, I'll be fluent in 6 months. And like, so I think it's really important to like just calm down and just like organize yourself. I lived in Perth and there are a lot of Brazilians just talking Portuguese. Exactly, like people, if you want to live a life in your first language in another country, you can do that. If you are from Brazil, for example, and if you wanna move to Canada and only speak Portuguese, you can do that. Of course, you're gonna have some limitations. I wouldn't be able to do that because I want to connect to people. I wanna find like different types of jobs or like volunteer. I want to be part of society, but it's normal. Like it's more common than we think. This is saying, I'll never forget the teachers carrying the little radio. I was this teacher. I used to carry my little radio too. And the CDs from the book. I don't even think that English books come with CD anymore. Maybe it's everything online. Yes, and then you had to connect like, oh, like what is the track for this exercise? And then you had like page 27, exercise 1, track 5 on the CD. And then you had to find the track and then like connect to the exercise and then like listen and repeat and conversation. Guys, that was not that far away. Like that's how I learned English, with CD players, and it was super cool. I think in Portuguese and trying to translate in English is very difficult. My brain's somewhere. Yes. All right. So I was just before I was talking about that. Lydia is saying, when I went to Toronto, Brazilians aren't talking Portuguese. No, please talk in English. I was this annoying Brazilian that no one wanted close by because I didn't want to speak Portuguese. Sorry. But I wanted to speak English. That was my choice, and that's fine. And I have Brazilian friends, okay, guys? Like I live with my Brazilian friend today in Australia because we chose to live together. But like that was an option, right? And if I know that today I'm living with another Brazilian and automatically I'm gonna speak a little bit more Portuguese, I created some strategies for myself to speak more English when I am not with her, right? So I only watch like TV and movies in English. I pretty much like only listen to English songs as well. I read in English, I write in English, I call my friends who speak English. Like my friend is in my house this weekend, so like I'm automatically speaking English, right? So I create these moments, I create these strategies because no one is gonna just knock on my door and say like, hey, I am Australian. I noticed that you're learning English. Would you like to talk to me? Like, no one's gonna do that. If you don't go out and try to connect to people and go to meetup groups and like make some friends, connect to people, say hi, ask for information on the street and start a conversation, no one's gonna go and do that for you, right? So it is, at the end, it's always your choice. Dri is saying, I saw this in California. People live there for a long time and don't speak English. Exactly. I went to California and I spoke more Spanish than English. And that's United States. I don't know because I was just there by myself last year. And then I was in California. I was in Los Angeles, like Venice Beach, Santa Monica, and all of that. And then I used to go to places, people just start talking to me. And once I said I'm Brazilian, people start speaking Spanish to me. And I was like, okay, I can practice my Spanish too. Like it's not my first language, but I can answer. Yeah, feeling in Mexico, exactly. That was my feeling. I was like, wow, I came to California too because I like American English and I wanted to have some holidays. And then I'm actually practicing my Spanish, which I find really cool. All my friends in Sydney are Brazilians. I found a job, aged care, then too much talking English. Yeah, aged care is really good for English because elders love to have conversations because they feel lonely sometimes. So it's a great practice for English. Lydia saying, I want to talk to you. I want to speak English just like you. Practice, 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 practice. No matter where the person is to learn English, but I think studying abroad helps on practicing what you learn. Exactly. And this, my opinion about studying abroad is that you have more options. But taking the options, like taking the opportunities, it's up to you. You know, sometimes it's just easier to stay in our community because it feels more comfortable. It's really like our comfort zone. But definitely, like if you go out on the street, all the signs are in English. You can just say hi to people and ask for information in English. So you have more opportunities to create the situations. But creating the situations, it's still on you. Like it's still your action, right? So a lot of people, they actually miss this opportunity. Connect to people is the best tip ever. I love connecting to people. Like that's why I learned English, because I like connecting to people. Kai, miss you. Kai saying she's loving the lives. I love doing lives. Like I find it so fun. I'm glad you guys like it and that it helps. Awesome. So let's keep talking about grammar. So I was just asking before, why is present perfect so difficult? And then there is a connection between the English language and your first language. So what happens is sometimes there are some types of structures in English that you don't have on your first language. So because your brain is so familiar to your first language, your brain cannot get like a connection. And then your brain is just like the Windows blue screen. And it's like, what is that? I don't know that. That's new for me, right? So once you are learning English and it's still like very similar to your first language, you can actually create these connections and it's easier for you to remember because you already know something similar that you've been using for years. But for example, my first language is Portuguese and I don't have present perfect in Portuguese. So when I was learning present perfect, my brain was kind of, what is going on? Like there is nothing for me to relate. There is nothing for me to connect. This is something new. And then we have to create, it's like if you have to create another box inside your brain just for that new topic. So when you are learning something new, that's exactly the same thing. For example, I am not good with music. I'm not good with instruments. And musical intelligence is one of my least favorite ones, like my worst ones. So for me, like sometimes I try like to play piano and all of that, but just for fun. And for my brain, it's like if I'm creating another box, I'm opening another empty box. And then my brain is like, oh, what is that? Like, that's something new. I've never done it. I'm doing that for the first time. So every time you do something for the first time, you have to put more effort on that. And the thing about present perfect and the thing about some other topics that you don't have on your first language, that's what happens. You try to create a relationship with something that you already know, but you can't do that. That's why it's so frustrating because it takes longer for us to learn because we are learning a totally new structure in English, right? So, and that's actually step 3 or 4. I'm lost in my numbers already, but that's fine. And that guides me to the next step. So when you are learning grammar, don't focus on the topic. For example, don't think about present perfect. Don't think about prepositions, but think about situations. So for example, a very good way of learning grammar is learning grammar inside something. And how you do that? So of course, it's impossible for me to teach you how to do that in my live, like in 1 hour live, but I'll just give you some overview so you can try to do it by yourself. So when you are learning grammar, don't think, for example, oh, how can I use present perfect? Because when you are talking to someone on the street, no one is gonna stop you and say like, hey, excuse me, can you use present perfect? It's like, what? You know, like no native speaker is gonna ask you that. Like, hi, we can have a conversation, can you use present perfect? No one's gonna ask you that. So instead of thinking about the grammar points, think about what you're trying to say. So instead of thinking like, oh, how do I use present perfect? Think about the opposite way. Think about, for example, oh, I really want to learn how to talk about my life experiences. How can I do that? And then you are going to learn grammar, you are going to learn present perfect, but inside that topic, you're gonna learn grammar with the full sentence instead of just learning like separate words and rules and structure. So once you can actually understand why you are learning that topic and when you have to use it, that's the most important thing. So instead of thinking, oh, I need to learn present perfect, and you don't even know what it is for, think the opposite. Think, for example, oh, I really want to learn how to express myself and talk about my life experiences. And then you're going to study that, how to talk about life experiences in English. And then inside that, there is present perfect. But the name doesn't matter. Like, honestly, guys, if you're having like a grammar lesson, just get the focus. Like, choose your goal. What is your goal? Your goal is to live in another country. What type of English do you need? Your goal is to travel. So what type of English do you need in the airport? What type of English do you need to connect to people, to talk about your life, to talk about your past, to talk about your working experiences? So it doesn't matter if you are learning like, oh, this is a noun, this is a verb, this is an adverb. You know, it's like me speaking Portuguese, which is my first language. It's like, I don't care if it's like pretérito, mais que perfeito, whatever. Like, I don't care. I can speak Portuguese, right? I just want to speak. I just want to have a conversation. I'm not teaching Portuguese. So today I believe that I know more grammar in English than in Portuguese, just because I've studied more. And that's simple. That's like mathematics, right? So don't worry too much about the names of the things. Don't focus on learning prepositions, on learning adverbs, on learning past perfect. Also, I think Barbara mentioned about past perfect. We don't even use past perfect. Like we very rare, it's very rare. Like we don't use past perfect. The only time I've actually seen past perfect is when someone is telling a story inside another story. So unless you are doing that, why do you need it? You know, like, so there are a lot of beautiful names that they are just scary. They're just there like to scare you. If you're not gonna be like an academic, or if you're not gonna be like an English teacher that you actually have to know the rules to teach someone, that doesn't matter. The important is if you can communicate, right? If you can be clear, if you can put the words in a correct order, if you can express yourself. So focus on your goal. Don't focus on the names of the things, okay? And I have a very funny story just before we finish the live, is that once a week I meet my English teacher from Canada. It's still like, we do like an exchange because she's learning Portuguese, and I'm always improving my English. So we do like weekly sessions, and then we do like Portuguese and English like switch. So this week she told me that she's learning conditionals in Portuguese. So conditionals is like if I were you, blah 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 blah, right? If this happened, this other thing is going to happen as well. So she's learning conditionals in Portuguese. And then she was like, oh, can you give me some explanation about the next session? And I was like, oh yeah, like fine, okay. I know how to use conditionals in Portuguese because that's my first language, right? So I'm like, se eu fosse você, blah, 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 blah. Se eu fosse, se eu quisesse. I know how to use it because that's my first language. And then I just stopped for a minute and then I was doing some research to bring her some exercises and I was like, how am I going to explain that? How am I going to explain Portuguese? And then I was actually doing some research on the internet. And then I was like, oh, to create conditionals in Portuguese, you're gonna use like the verb, I even forgot the name now. It's like pretérito imperfeito do subjuntivo mais something else. And I was like, what is that? I was like, now I understand English students again. I was like, why they use these long, difficult names? You know, like I know how to speak in the conditionals. That's my language. So I know how to use it. I know when to use it. But once I had to explain that and I had to research for the structure in Portuguese of the conditionals, I was like, man, that's too complicated. You know, and like, I don't know grammar in Portuguese. Like, I know how to use it. So that's the point. Like, you don't have to focus too much on grammar to speak English. It's the more you practice, the more natural it's gonna get. And then you're gonna just use things that you remember and then you just got it from someone and then you're just repeating it, but it makes totally sense. And you don't have to know the name behind that. Does it make sense? So once you actually learn how to use present perfect, you're gonna just use present perfect without realizing that you are actually using present perfect because you are learning the whole sentence. You are learning the whole thing and not really the beautiful names, okay? So that's like a very good story that I wanted to share. And I still don't know how to explain conditionals in Portuguese. I was like, okay, we're gonna figure it out together. Like, we can do that, like fine. So I'm definitely not a Portuguese teacher. So that's something like really funny. And sometimes she asks me question about Portuguese and I just stop and she was like, oh, what's the difference between the verbs poder and conseguir? And I was like, wait, give me 1 second to think about it and then I can answer. So she asks me so many questions that I've never thought about that before, just because Portuguese is my first language. And the same happens when I ask my friends about something. So if I'm speaking English with some of my friends and I don't know a rule, like a grammar rule, and I ask them, they just look at me like, good question. I've never thought about it. Or like, I don't know, like it is what it is, you know, like that's just the way it is, or it sounds better because they don't learn grammar. Right? They know how to speak, but like grammar doesn't really matter. So use grammar as a way of helping you to get some guidelines and not really something to be like a monster in your life, okay? And I really hope that helps, and I really hope you start seeing grammar with different eyes and focus on your goal. Focus on what you're trying to learn other than just the beautiful names of grammar, okay? And remember the learning cycle: study, practice, and repeat. So always 3 steps. And I'll just finish your comments here so we can finish the live. And tomorrow we don't have live because it's Sunday in Australia and I don't want to work on Sunday to be very honest. So no class on Sunday. And then on Monday, we are back same time, 9:17 in the morning. So Renato is saying, I tried to say to native speakers if he knows about present perfect rules. What is it? Exactly. Once I asked my friend about connectors, I think, like linking words, and they were like, what's connectors? Like, what? Like, Aline, what are you talking about? You know, like, if they are not English teachers, they wouldn't know it, pretty much. Yes. So, Barbara, think about the opposite, because you're saying you think about the rules and then you forget the subject. So think about the subject and forget the rules a little bit. Erica is saying we lost a lot of time learning the names and rules of English grammar instead of focusing the main stuff. Exactly. So just focus on what you're trying to learn, like the topic, and then you start getting some content to to do that. And Risa, my friend, said, don't ask me why. Exactly, that's my question. I'm like, why do you say that? Why do you use to instead of for? And my friends are like, it sounds better. And I'm like, no, like there must be a rule. Like, what is the rule? I'm an English teacher. Come on, guys, you need to help me. It's really fun. So yeah, guys, so just focus on communicate. Focus on passing your message, and then the grammar is gonna be like a consequence. The grammar is gonna be one more tool to help you with your message, and not really something to get it to make you feel stuck, right? The idea of grammar is not to make you feel stuck, but it's actually to help you to move forward. All right, so thank you so much for watching the live today. And then tomorrow we're not gonna meet, but on Monday, 9:17 in the morning, I am back here. And I think we're gonna talk about speaking or pronunciation. I don't remember the order. I think it's speaking first. But I'm gonna post my yellow page with the classes, and then you know the class that we have for Monday, which is gonna be Sunday night for many countries. But I know we are like in this crazy season, so I know you guys have time to come. Thank you so much for coming and watch live. It's really helpful. It's really good for me to have this interaction, because I don't want to just stay here 1 hour just talking by myself. So as much as you can, please come live, because that's much better than just watching the record first. You can interact, you can ask me questions, and I can answer the questions at the same time. So I really love when you guys come live. So please, if you can make the effort to come live, please do. I prefer that much better than just recording. I actually record the session just because I know there are people in different countries and different time zones, but it's not my preference, to be honest. I really like the live, you know, like the real feeling, like, yes, people are here, like we are connected at the same time. It's really like this human feeling that I really appreciate. So thank you so much for your time. I really hope that helps. And I'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend, guys. Bye-bye.